One of the cool things about the NFL is that you could be a bottom feeder. You could be an absolute dumpster fire. And with a couple of key moves, a couple of key pieces added, maybe some good luck mixed in, you can right the ship pretty quickly. Look at, let's say, the San Francisco 49ers. 2018 season, they finished with like the second worst record in the entire league. And by the time they got to 2019, they're this close to winning the Super Bowl. The Bengals in 2019 had the worst record in the NFL. Got Joe Burrow. By his second season, they almost win the Super Bowl. So it can happen like that. And a couple of years ago, the Eagles looked like an absolute dumpster fire. I know I tweeted about it. I talked about it in video. But it looked like a really, really terrible situation. They were massively over the salary cap. You had the whole Carson Wentz thing. You gave him a big extension. Then it looks like he's not going to be the guy. And then you're moving off of him. You end up showing Doug Peterson the door. It was really, really rough. In 2021, the Eagles righted the ship a little bit. They made the playoffs. But there were still questions about the team. Certainly questions about the quarterback, Jalen Hurts. But as you went into the offseason, you could start to feel that there were going to be some expectations for the Eagles in 2022, especially when you look at some of their offseason acquisitions. They signed Hassan Reddick and James Bradbury. Those are two pretty big pieces to add on their defense. And then, of course, making the big trade at draft time, sending a first-round pick to the Tennessee Titans to bring A.J. Brown in the fold, to pair him with Devontae Smith. And now all of a sudden you've got two kind of legit weapons. If you want to count Dallas Goedert, you certainly can. Three legit weapons for Jalen Hurts in the passing game. Now you're looking at the Eagles and you're saying, man, in a couple of years they look like have no future at all, to all of a sudden, this is a team that's a division threat. This is a team that could be a real deal championship contender. And they certainly were this year. And you look at the Eagles, they were absolutely a balanced and complete team. Offensively, they were an elite unit, right? They were third in total yards per game, third in total points. And you look at their scoring output, you had 8 games, including the playoffs, of scoring 30 points or more. If you're able to score that many points that consistently, you are going to win a lot of games in the NFL nowadays. Jalen Hurts had an MVP caliber season. You could certainly make an argument if there was no Patrick Mahomes that maybe he would be the MVP. Between passing and running the ball, he had over 4,400 yards of total offense, 35 combined touchdowns. For a guy that the Eagles took in the second round of the draft in 2020, 3 years later, you're talking about he's playing close to an MVP level. You feel really, really good about that. Miles Sanders had his best year as a pro in a contract year, over 1,200 yards rushing. And you made the big trade for A.J. Brown, and he certainly came through and delivered almost 1,500 yards receiving and 11 touchdowns. Devontae Smith, the 2021 first-round pick, had almost 1,200 yards receiving. So that offense had a lot of ways that it could beat you. And they could do it both on the ground and through the air. And then defensively, you're talking about a team, like I said, that added Reddick and Bradbury in the offseason. Already had guys like Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham on the defensive line and Josh Sweat as well. And then Darius Slay in the secondary. Now you add those dudes. It didn't even matter that they made that in-season trade for Robert Quinn from the Bears, and then Quinn really isn't around because of an injury. It didn't even matter. That defense was still great. Second in yards allowed, seventh in points allowed. You can win a lot of games with that too in the NFL, especially if your offense could do what the Eagles' offense could do. They had 9 games, including the playoffs, where they allowed 17 or fewer points. And one of the real keys to success for the Eagles this year was their ability to get after starting quarterbacks game in and game out on a consistent basis. They were a major problem. You had a team that had 69 sacks in a 17-game season. Brandon Graham, Javon Hargrave, Josh Sweat all had 11 sacks each. Hassan Reddick had 16. They also forced turnovers. They were 4th in the league in interceptions. So you're looking at a team that could pressure you, get at your quarterback, get to your quarterback, and even if they didn't quite get to the quarterback, they could make some plays happen in the back half of their defense. So it's not a surprise that this team had a really good season in the NFC East. and they finished 14-3 overall, ended up with the top seed in the NFC. And one of the real challenges for me evaluating the Eagles this year was you could tell they were a really good team, but how battle-tested were they? And just how legit were they if they were going to have to go up against a team like the Chiefs or the Bengals or the Bills in the Super Bowl? It was really hard to gauge. And it didn't get a whole lot easier when you look at their path to the playoffs. They had an easy path against an overmatched and overwhelmed Giants team in the divisional round. They had a relatively easy path in the NFC Championship game against the 49ers, who were on that point their third-string quarterback, who quickly got hurt, down to their fourth-string quarterback in Josh Johnson. And now they come to the Super Bowl against the Chiefs. And it's got to hurt if you're an Eagles fan, I'm sure. You've been here before with Super Bowl losses, right? A couple of them, depending upon how old you are. But what's got to be heartbreaking about it is you were this close. And you could blame a questionable defensive holding call or anything like that. You could question some of these things. But the reality is the Eagles played, for the most part, a really good Super Bowl, and they were just outplayed a little bit by the Kansas City Chiefs. It sucks because in some respects, Jalen Hurts, you could have made an argument, was the real Super Bowl MVP. I mean, he had over 300 yards, all the touchdowns he accounted for in that game. But unfortunately, he also accounted for a fumble return touchdown, which was critical. And without that, the Chiefs may not win that Super Bowl. So, you go into that game with questions of how is Jalen Hurts going to match up against Patrick Mahomes? Well, relatively speaking, he did a hell of a job. Hell of a job. But yeah, you'll still probably have some questions about Jalen Hurts in this offseason. People talk about, will the Eagles really want to commit 45 to 50 million a year to him? And I get it. But yeah, it's crazy. You go out there and play damn near like a Super Bowl MVP type of guy, and you're still going to have some questions about you because you didn't win the big one. But it sucks if you're the Eagles because you had what looked like, and certainly was, a well-balanced, complete team, a team that could run the ball well on offense, a team that could throw the ball pretty well on offense. You had a really good offensive line, and then defensively, you've got a line that could just absolutely get after it, a couple of studs in the secondary. This, in a lot of ways, felt like a championship team, and they just didn't quite have enough. The Chiefs had just a little bit too much Mahomes in key spots. Not like Mahomes had a big day or anything, but the biggest problem for the Eagles is a defense that was so built on their ability all year to get after opposing quarterbacks, got so little pressure, so little heat on Mahomes. They didn't sack Mahomes once in the Super Bowl. When you look at differences, you could say, well, Jalen Hurts' fumble that was returned for a touchdown, that's one. Certainly is, but the bigger theme throughout the course of the game was the inability of the Eagles' defense to be able to get consistent pressure and heat and in the face of Patrick Mahomes. So where do you go now if you're the Eagles? It's hard to keep a team intact, even a team like this, and there might certainly be some changes. It's hard to expect that you can go from losing the Super Bowl one year to winning it the next. That doesn't happen a lot anymore. It can happen, but it doesn't happen very often. So this is a rough pill, I assume, for Eagles fans to swallow, because at the end of the day, no matter how great of a season as they had, and the Eagles absolutely had a great season, it still comes down to second place is the first loser. And you didn't get the job done in the biggest of spotlights. It was a great Super Bowl to watch. Kind of tainted based off of the way things finished, for sure. But man, oh man, it's got to be a tough time for the Eagles fans, that organization, that team, because you got to wonder, was that the best chance you were going to have? Or can you get back to this same spot in 2023?